You may know this international renowned DJ through his work with longtime production partner John Digweed and the Bedrock Project. As a producer with a substantial amount of releases and remixes, this year officially marks the 20th anniversary of the Bedrock record label. While on the road touring, he's agreed to take some time to speak with us about his experience and journey as a seasoned and well-traveled DJ, producer known as Nick Muir. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Kilma. How are you going?
So good. And so excited to be talking with you today.
Excellent.
My friends are jealous. So can you tell us a bit about your early beginnings and how it led you to where you are today?
Well, it's a long story now. It's getting longer as the years go by. I'll try and keep it short. I was a keyboard player, professional keyboard player for 10 years or so when I was in my 20s. And I was like a sideman, piano and organ I used to play. And then the rave revolution happened in the UK around about 1990. And I was playing professionally and I knew a load of people in the business. And then when this type of music started to kick in, then I knew it was something that I wanted to get involved in almost straight away, really. I suppose I was a certain age where I had enough equipment to start trying to make this type of music more or less straight away. So I did. I pitched in, got myself a computer, an Atari computer and a bunch of samplers like people did back in that day. And I was starting to make records and I knew a few people who was starting to release records. And then fairly shortly after that, I got introduced to John Digweed, who I've been working with ever since. Now, you meet a lot of people when you're in the business. You get introduced to a lot of DJs and people who would like to try and do something with music. But when I met John, I realized that he was serious about what he wanted to do. And it was just sheer luck that we managed to hook up, really. We met through a friend of mine who was a sax player in a band that I was in. What happened was that he was playing at the, in Austria, there was a ski season. They still do it now. And in the winter season, they would have entertainment. My mate, who was the sax player, he would play in the band, and John was playing out there as the DJ. And he said, oh, my mate Nick, he's into that kind of music, which nobody really knew very much about at that point. And he introduced us, and then we started making records, and more or less straight away, we started having a little bit of success. So, and we're still together 25 years on. And we've watched it, in that time, we've watched it grow into this enormous monster that it is today. And John's really still at the top of his game. I think when he started, he thought it might last maybe 3 or 4 years. And 25 years later, we're still together and making music. So when he started to get a bit of success and he wanted me to come along with him to help him produce and make records and do the studio side of things, we just kept with it and been making records ever since. So that's more or less how I got into what I'm doing now.
Nice. I love that brotherhood. I love that that sense of community. People introducing you, you guys working together, and him wanting to bring you to be a part of this. Can you tell us a bit about your process in the studio, maybe both like on your own and what it looks like when you're collaborating with somebody like John?
Well, that's changed over the years. Initially, you see, when we started, the internet was not what it was, not what it is today, obviously not. And in fact, computer technology was nowhere near what it is now. So the process has changed. Luckily enough, I had a room in a studio, like a big studio complex, but I had my own programming room. A friend of mine who I'd made an album with was a producer, like used to produce rock bands and produced one of the bands that I was in. And so I had my room. He bought a bunch of samplers and wanted me to start using them, try and figure out how to use these things. And so what used to happen was that John would come down and we would sit together and he'd play me a bunch of records and say, you know, can we make something that sounds more or less like this? And so he'd say, well, I really love this sound, so I'd make something that kind of sounded a bit like that. And then he said, how about trying something else? And then we'd put it all together in a big pot and mix it all together. And we'd end up with a record. Now, the thing is, all those years later, we've been working for so long now together that I kind of know what he wants me to do. And he's pretty busy. And so what we do is we discuss the project that we're working on, and I get busy with it and then run drafts by him, and he chops and changes it as he sees fit. The relationship that John and I have, he's kind of like a director, really. And I'm the producer to his director. He's amazing in terms of getting the sound and understanding the direction that he wants the music to take. But we don't spend so much time in the studio together anymore. I mean, he's super busy, man. You know, like, as you know, Kilma, this thing has turned into very big deal, and John is flying all around the world more or less all the time, playing big gigs to lots of people. I mean, when he started, the idea of an international DJ hadn't really fully formed yet, you know. So we got together more often than we do now. But like I say, in those days we were still finding our way. But now we're very confident of the sound that we want to make. So we spend less time in the studio together. I have a room about 10 minutes from where I live, and I jump in the Land Rover and go and sit in there, and he gets in touch with me and we chat and email, and I work up a draft of what it is that we're going to do and then pass it by him, and he makes changes and I make changes, and then we end up with a mix at the end of the day. So how it used to be was that we would spend more time in the studio together when we were finding our way, but now we know what we're doing, so we spend less time in the studio. Now I'm out playing as well now, so you know, that's how we roll.
Yes, you'll be here in Winnipeg this weekend.
That's where you are now, right?
Yes. I love that you two have found a process though that really works for you, and you know, it's obviously changed throughout the years, and I feel like that's so important for artists to be able to adapt, especially if you're on the road all the time. And speaking of, as a touring artist, I imagine there are some serious time management skills going on. How do you manage your time when life can be so unpredictable on the road?
I'm not very good at that. It's all in the preparation, isn't it? That's the thing. I mean, this tour that I'm doing, these 4 dates, I did it because I wanted to come to Canada. I don't know if Amber, our friend Amber Long, told you, but I'm dual national. My dad was Canadian, and that's one reason why I wanted to come here, because I wanted to come back to Canada. I wanted to try and do some gigs as a Canadian, and so I had to sort this tour out more or less myself. Normally you would do it through the agency, but this time around I actually got in touch with people myself with Amber's help, and managed to hit a few people up. I've not been here before. I've not played here before, and so if you start off somewhere new, you can't expect too much. But I think people who are in this scene kind of know who I am now, and so I was able to generate enough interest in order to get the ball rolling. But I had to book the tour myself. I had to do all the flights, and there's train travel involved. And of course, I'm from the UK. Canada, we're not really very used to a country the size of Canada. I think to myself, okay, so I'll play in Montreal, and somebody says, yeah, there's a gig in Calgary, you can do that. Okay, I'll go Montreal to Calgary, not realizing that it was 3,000 kilometers away. I thought I might hire a car or something. But so when I started to find all this stuff out, then I realized I had to book the thing quite carefully. So the preparation, if you don't prepare properly, then you're not going to be able to fit it all in. So in answer to your question, it's just, do your homework and make sure you know where you're going before you leave. I try and do a bit of work when I'm on the road, but I find writing on the road is a challenge, because so much of what we do depends on the sound of the thing. And I've got my room where I can run things pretty loud if I need to. And I find in the latter stages of a production, I like to turn it up a little bit so I get the physical effect of it. And so I'm just trying to figure out a way of writing on the road. And that would help with my time management, because there are bits of production and things that I need to be doing right now. And I'm not quite set up properly to do it. It is something that I think people do. And so I'm going to try and see if I can get that together a bit better, because there's plenty to do. And the more you can do on the road, the better. But it's all good.
I really love and appreciate the fact that even though you've been in the industry for such a long time and the process has changed, that you're still adapting and open to and positive about that different experience. In your long-standing career, what are some lessons you feel you might have only learned had you made the mistakes to get to that understanding?
One thing that I could have done differently, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't have worked if I had done it differently, but I do tend to, I worry a lot about my productions, and I spend a lot of time trying to get them right. And I don't know whether I could be accused of overthinking things sometimes. And as a producer, you have to guard against expending effort which doesn't necessarily need to be expended. Okay, so I do spend a lot of time on my productions, and I sometimes wonder if the changes that I'm making make any difference. You see what I mean? And that goes back to your point about time management. You have to try. It's tricky, this. You have to try and stick to that which matters. And you have to be selective about what it is, your decisions you're making along the way, so that you can spend the time that you've got the most effectively. And I think I could be accused of, maybe not making the most of my time by making too much of but I say that, but at the same time, if I hadn't spent the time that I have over the productions over the years, I wonder if we would have had the breaks that we had.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not sure that I could have done it any other way. And bear in mind as well that when we started with this, there was no rule book to follow. There was no school of audio engineering to attend. There was it was a completely open field, and that's one of the reasons that it's been such an amazing experience. Because when John and I started, we felt as if we had a completely free hand to do what we wanted to do. And so we were kind of making it up on the hoof, really. And I've done it that way ever since. And I suppose that's one of the reasons that our productions have sounded the way they do, because we weren't following any kind of a formula particularly. We were just doing what we thought, might work in a club. I was lucky with John because John, somewhere along the line, he really knows what works in a club. And he seems to have an instinctive feel of that. And I've picked that up over the years. I kind of understand where he's coming from and what he wants from his mixes. And but where he got it from, I don't really know. I mean, I know that he used to listen to DJs back in the day in the 80s who he knew, but he has his own take on these things. And I've been lucky with John because we're on the same wavelength musically. So I don't know if you've ever had the experience of being in a studio with somebody who you're not on the same wavelength musically. It's like they're talking a different language, really. Mm-hmm. It's like they'll say things which I don't really understand what they're talking about. Not in terms of technical jargon or anything, but just because it just doesn't quite I don't know what they're hearing. With John, he can point something out to me and I just understand what he means because we're listening to the same thing. So that's rare, I think. I mean, I've been working in music for all my working life, and I'm not a young guy anymore. But in all that time, I suppose John and maybe one or two others are the only people that I've ever really clicked with musically to the point where we can totally agree on which way the music's going. So, been lucky in that respect, Kilma.
What would you say you attribute the longevity of your production career to?
Well, as I was saying, really, it's because John and I have forged a viable relationship, which is based on, I mean, we are friends, obviously, but our relationship is based on the music and our general agreement of what it is that we want this music to do and how we want it to sound. And the fact that it's always been going forward, and it kind of goes forward without you even having to push it forward, really. Well, that's how it feels to me anyway. It kind of has a little bit of a life of its own, and it evolves and develops. And if you're DJing, then you're listening to other tracks, and you know what it's like. You'll be sitting there in your room writing your track, and then somebody will send you something which just blows your mind. And you think, wow, how are they doing that? That still happens to me now. I'll be sitting there listening to stuff and I'm thinking, man, that just sounds amazing. How are they doing that? And so you spend the next few weeks trying to up your game. And that seems to be the fact that you never feel as if you've quite got there. That's one reason that keeps you going, because you're always trying to make that, get that sound. You're reaching for that sound. And by the very nature of it, you'll never actually get there, because there's always going to be somebody who's going to put a new spin on it because of their own version of events. And also the love of the music. That's the thing. It's like when I was working as a keyboard player, as a sideman, then I'd be interpreting, other pieces of music, and that was fine, and I was into it. But this music I believe in, it speaks to me in a way that the stuff that I used to play when I was in my 20s didn't speak to me. For some reason, this music resonates with me. I don't know what it is. I can't really put my finger on it exactly, but it just, it means something to me. And that's one of the reasons that you stick with it, because I've never got tired of it. It's never been a chore, and I've never lost the love of this particular type of music. So those two things, the fact that I have this production partnership with John, which I find very rewarding, and also the music itself, which I love. So I reckon that's about why I'm still going.
Very beautifully said. I don't know if we could end this on a better note. I wanted to ask if there are any additional comments you'd like to make, or maybe some upcoming releases, tours you'd like us to know about.
I want to point people in the direction of Bedrock 20 album that we did. Now that's been out for a little while now, but I think it's a piece of work that we're both proud of. I mean, John's vision, it's like it crystallizes it really well, this type of music that we do. It's got a bunch of tracks by artists that we really like and admire, and a couple of pieces of our own productions. So I'd urge people to check that out. John's Live in Tokyo CD, that's a really, really good example of what he does, and it's a really good exposition of the type of music that we do. We've got a mix out, a track called Hope on Watergate Records by Matthias and Sullivan. That's just out now. I've done a remix of Batoko, and there's another remix by that I've done for what's that? Oh yeah, I did a remix of Dharmology and DJ Sanjay Dutta, his name is, for Perspective Digital, which is Darren Epsilon's label. So there's a few bits. Come down and see me at Winnipeg, please. It's been a real treat coming to Canada. Montreal and Calgary last weekend were, I mean, it's just so far above expectations that it's been a fantastic trip. So
good. I'm so glad. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so excited to see you on Friday. By the time this full video goes out, I will have
shout out to Amber. Shout out to Amber Long.
Yes, Amber, you are amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
she has an upcoming.
One of the reasons I'm here is because of Amber. So she urged me to do this, and she said, "Why don't you speak to Kimber?" So
yeah,
thanks
and
for having me. Yeah?
Of course, we actually are interviewing her this weekend.
Oh, excellent.
Hers will be coming out right after yours.
Well, we're going to play in Toronto on Saturday night, the two of us together. So it's going to be messy.
Wonderful. Messy. I like it. I like it.